Of the several hundred comments that I've received about my video, Is Bill Gates the Antichrist? Several of the commentators have suggested that I'm completely wrong because I've got the date of the book of Revelation completely wrong as well. And of course, if the book of Revelation was written in AD 95, I am wrong. But what's the evidence for the book of Revelation being written well before 95 AD? Firstly, the evidence for the book of Revelation being written in AD 95 is very scant. In fact, there's only one reference upon which scholars and people base their opinion that the book of Revelation was written in AD 95, and that comes from a citation from Irenaeus of Lyon in France, when in 185 AD he made reference to something that's roughly translated, the writer of the Apocalypse was seen during the reign of Domitian. Important to note that Domitian did reign in AD 95, and in 185 we're dealing with history that's nearly 100 years after the event. That's the only evidence for the book of Revelation being written in AD 95. What's important to note about that citation is it does not say that the book of Revelation was written in AD 95. Only that the author of the book of Revelation was seen in AD 95. There's little doubt that John did live till about AD 95 at least. So what's the evidence that the book of Revelation was written much earlier? In fact, I'm stating that it must have been written in AD 65, and there's good reasons internally for that. So let's have a look at some of the internal reasoning. Firstly, in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 9, John says that he was their brother in the tribulation, in other words, the persecution of the church. When did the first wave of persecution happen against Christians? It happened not in AD 95, but in AD 64, when Nero began persecuting Christians by the tens of thousands. Some of the victims, some of the martyrs of this first wave of persecution against the church included the Apostle Peter, included the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Peter was crucified and the Apostle Paul was beheaded. And according to Tertullian, it was Nero who banished John to the Isle of Patmos after ordering for him to be put in a cauldron of boiling oil. And we see that Jerome cites that it was Nero who banished John to the island of Patmos. This must have taken place at least during the lifetime of Nero, which Nero died in AD 68. Now that's one of the first evidences, but let's have a look at some of the other internal evidence for the book of Revelation being written in AD 65, not AD 95. When we come to Revelation chapter 11, John is told to go and measure the temple. So presumably he's now off the Isle of Patmos. And in AD 95, there was no temple in Jerusalem for him to measure, because the temple was destroyed by the Romans along with the city of Jerusalem in AD 70. And that's one of the internal clues that the book of Revelation must have been written before AD 95. Added to this, in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 10, John tells us prophetically that there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen and 1 now is. So when we run through the kings that would have been relevant to the original audience, even if we're dealing with an AD 95 audience, we have to start with the king of Rome, Julius Caesar. So we have Julius Caesar, the first king, Augustus, his son, adopted son, Octavian, who became Augustus. Then we have Tiberius, who's mentioned in Luke chapter 3, verse 1. Then after Tiberius, we have Caligula. Then after Caligula, we have Claudius, and he's mentioned in Acts 11:28. 5 have fallen. The next one to come after Claudius was Nero. Nero reigned until AD 68. And so that says right there that he is, at the time of the writing of the book of Revelation, he is. Added to this, The close of the canon must have happened before AD 70, and the reason for that is both in Luke's Gospel, in Matthew's Gospel, we have Christ predicting the destruction of Jerusalem. For those Gospels to have been written, as some suppose, around AD 80 or beyond, is to pretend that what Christ said was actually prophecy, when in fact by that time it would have been history. And the book of Revelation is clearly the last book of the New Testament canon. In other words, it would have been the closing book. It would have been the last book to be written. So therefore, for the Gospels to have been written after the AD 70 event would have put them in disrepute as history dressed up as prophecy. So what's the relevance of this? What's the point? Why are we arguing about when the book of Revelation was written? Well, I've consistently said in the previous video on Is Bill Gates the Antichrist, that when we look at the book of Revelation, we have to do what we do with all the books of the Bible, and that is ask the question, who is this written to? Because while it has particular audiences, I've also said that all the books of the Bible, including the book of Revelation, is written for us. And this is what the New Testament teaches, that all of God's word is profitable, all of it, and it's written for us, even though it may have been written to a particular audience. Now what that means is that, like any prophecy given throughout the Bible, it was a prophecy for the original audience. And there are some prophecies which we now consider to be fulfilled prophecies, even though in the day and to the audience that it was given, it was yet to be fulfilled prophecy. And I think we can make the same case from the book of Revelation, that there are prophecies that were given in the early chapters of the book of Revelation that were specifically to the people alive at the time it was written, and in particular to those Christians of the 7 churches of Asia, to whom it says it's addressed to. We can see this in the time frame references in the first 19 chapters. It uses expressions like now, at hand, this hour, is. And so we see this time frame reference changes. It changes in Revelation chapter 20, where it's no longer now at hand is. It's actually speaking using the biblical expression 1,000 years. And in that chapter we see the return of Christ, which is yet to be fulfilled. It is for us still prophecy. So what's the point there? I'm going to make the case, and I make the case in my book, The Most Embarrassing Verse in the Bible, where I discuss this, that Revelation chapters 1 to 19 corresponds to Matthew chapter 24. And I make the case that it is being fulfilled, largely because Jesus said it would be. Matthew chapter 24, verse 34. And so we see that Revelation chapter 20 corresponds to Matthew chapter 25, which talks about the sheep and the goats and so on. And in that section, we see Jesus commanding and endorsing and affirming his followers for treating people with love and grace and kindness, visiting those who were imprisoned, helping those who were homeless, helping those who were without food, those who were hungry, those who were naked. And Jesus says, for as much as you did it to the least of these, you've done it to me. So what's the relevance? The relevance is that we are called to represent the love of God to people. We're called in this day, before Christ returns, to represent his love and his kindness to others. And what is yet to come is his return. And in Revelation chapter 20, we see that that will correspond to the final judgment. This is still prophecy for us today. So those people who've commented on my video, Is Bill Gates the Antichrist, and said that I'm saying that all of the book of Revelation has no relevance for us today, have completely misunderstood what I've said. I think it has enormous relevance for us today, just like all of the Bible does. So if you'd like more information on this, please go to my website, andrewcorbett.net, and I'd appreciate if you'd hit like on this video. And if you want more, I'll be doing these videos on particular in the book of Revelation, just ever so occasionally. But every day I post a video as we go through every book of the Bible, every day. So would you please subscribe to this channel, and you can be a part of that journey as well.